Welcome and good day. I'm Jessienhel Magundang, graduate of Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Physics at Isabela State University, City of Ilagan Campus, currently teaching at Central Isabela Christian Academy in Cor. Our group was assigned to discuss Chapter 4, Philosophy of Education in the Philippines. My topic is about Lesson 1, the historical overview, development of education in the Philippines. The objectives of our lesson are: cite significant developments in the philosophy of education in the Philippines, compare and contrast the educational philosophies used in the Philippines throughout the course of history, and write a reflection paper on the mandate and mission of CHED. To start with, in the development of education in the Philippines, we will discuss the Spanish era. During the Spanish colonial period in the Philippines in the year 1521 to 1898, the different cultures of the archipelago experienced a gradual unification from a variety of native Asian and Islamic customs and traditions, including animist religious practices, to what is known today as Filipino culture. A unique hybrid of Southeast Asian and Western culture, namely Spanish language and the Catholic faith. During the early years of Spanish colonization, education was mostly religion-oriented and controlled by the Roman Catholic Church. Spanish friars and missionaries educated the natives through religion with the aim of converting indigenous populations to the Catholic faith. With the coming of Spain, the European system of education was introduced to the archipelago. Primary schools, colleges, and universities were established in our country by the missionaries. The principal aim of Spain in the Philippines during their regime was to make the native Filipinos obedient and God-fearing Christians. For this reason, religion was compulsory subject at all levels, from the primary schools to the universities. The first schools were the parochial schools opened by the missionaries in their parishes. In addition to religion, the native children in these schools were taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and some vocational and practical arts subjects. Later on, colleges for boys and girls were opened by the missionaries. These colleges were the equivalent of our high schools today. The subject taught to the students included history, Latin, geography, mathematics, and philosophy. Spanish education played a major role in that transformation. The oldest universities, colleges, and vocational schools, dating as far back as the 16th century, were created during the colonial period, as well as the first modern public education system in Asia, established in 1863. By the time Spain was replaced by the United States as the colonial power, Filipinos were among the most educated peoples in all of Asia, boasting one of the highest literacy rates in that continent. Simultaneously, the knowledge of Filipinos about neighboring cultures receded. Next is the American colonization and the Commonwealth. The United States had a different approach dictated by what the Americans considered to be their principal goal in coming to the Philippines. Their principal goal was to educate and to train in the science of self-government. Consequently, it was not surprising that United States considered educating the Filipinos as one of its top priorities in the Philippines. Even while U.S. troops were consolidating their foothold in Manila in 1898, schools were already opened in the city. But unlike the Spaniards who neglected to propagate their language, the Americans made it to a point to teach English to the Filipinos. The American soldiers were the first teachers of the Filipinos. In January 1901, free primary education was provided and a school for Filipino teachers was established. It called for the recruitment of trained teachers in America. It abolished compulsory religious instructions. The Americans gave bright young Filipino students opportunity to take up higher education in American colleges and universities. These Filipinos came to be known as pensionados, for their education in the United States was financed by the government in the Philippines. Hundreds of Filipino pensionados were able to study in the U.S. until 1928. From the ranks of these pensionados came the future civic, business, and political leaders of our country. It established a scholarship program for Filipinos to attend school in the United States. The program has roots in pacification efforts following the Philippines. We have here the Pensionado Act, or the Pensionado Act number 854 of the Philippine Commission, which passed on August 26, 1903, passed by the United States Congress. Education continued to receive from the Commonwealth government the same attention that the Americans gave it. President Quezon created the National Council of Education in 1936 as an advisory body on educational matters. The council made important recommendations to further improve the educational systems in the Philippines. Most of these recommendations were accepted and carried out by the government. Under the Commonwealth, vocational and adult education was given emphasis. It was also during the Commonwealth regime that an organized effort to develop a common national language was stirred in compliance with the mandate of the 1935 Constitution to help counteract the American cultural influence among the Filipinos. President Quezon greatly encouraged the revival of native culture as well as desirable Filipino values, and to help strengthen the moral fibers of the Filipinos and to foster love of our country, especially among the youth. President Quezon issued his famous Code of Ethics, which was required to be taught in all schools. Next is the Japanese era. Under the Japanese regime, the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and character education was reserved for Filipinos. Love for work and dignity of labor was emphasis. On February 27, 1945, the Department of Instruction was made part of the Department of Public Instruction. Tagalog, Philippine history, and character education were the focus. Love for work and dignity for labor was emphasis. There was the spread, elementary and vocational education. Nipongo was used and the Japanese tried to stop the Filipino people from using the English language. Next is the Third Republic and the New. In 1948, Dr. Jose V. Aguilar, the superintendent of the Iloilo Schools Division, initiated a 6-year experiment with vernacular instruction in his school division. The experiment involved 7 control schools where English was used as the medium of instruction in grades 1 and 2, and 7 experimental schools where the vernacular Hiligaynon was used as instructional medium. This was controversial. As late as 1963, the Dean of College of Education, Xavier University on the island of Mindanao, observed that the vernacular instruction was not producing maximum result. It was curtailing full instructional benefit instead of narrowing the regional gaps of the country. It was widening it and was producing dangerous trends towards regional and cultural imbalance. Educational policies have been geared to the accomplishment of better manpower production through the understanding by the students of land reform, taxation, economic production, anti-drug and anti-pollution, and conservation education during the Third Republic and the New Society. To accomplish these goals, the value and work-oriented curricula were encouraged. However, many parents and teachers were still confused because they did not understand the philosophy, operations, and evaluations in this innovation in education. The concept of an average layman or teacher in the new society was always associated with the advent of martial law. This must be redirected to a functional definition of wholesome integration of our economic, social, and moral lives for a progressive Philippines. The direction of education as envisioned by our educators can be best described by the following changes. Number 1. A relevant and flexible curriculum. Educational content is focused on the need of society, which is for sound economy. This means better knowledge in skills and food production, conservation of natural resources, technical knowledge in harnessing mineral deposits, and less emphasis on white-collar jobs, which result only in producing the educated unemployed. Next is the productive coordinated technocrats. The inevitable reorganization of the Department of Education was a response to these needs. For centuries, our educational system generally operated on a system of isolation where the Bureau of Public, Private, and Vocational Education worked almost independently and promoted secrecy and privacy instead of attaining harmony for the good of our country. Last is a quality teacher with effective methods of teaching. To teach effectively, the teacher must have the solid foundations in terms of educational training from reputable institutions. Update his method of teaching by reading and attending conferences, and should have the courage of trying out various means or ways of maximizing learner. To do this, it becomes necessary to understand the psychology of pupils and to be able to communicate with them in teaching-learning situations. The increase in teachers' pay should be a strong justification for the better policy on the recruitment and retention of teachers. Every time changes in our educational system occur, to search for the solution of our educational ills, some pressure groups interfere and say, it is unrealistic and expensive, which is not a valid reason. Courage and energy for action should be sustained to invigorate the lives of our citizenry. The next thing we will discuss is the management structure of the current Department of Education. So to carry out its mandates and objectives, the department is organized into two major structural components. First is the Central Office. The Central Office maintains the overall administration of basic education at the national level. Next is the Field Offices. The field offices are responsible for the regional and local coordination and administration of the department mandate. The Republic Act 9155 provides that the department should have no more than 4 undersecretaries and 4 assistant secretaries, with at least 1 undersecretary and 1 assistant secretary who are career service officers chosen among the staff of the department. In 2015, the department underwent a restructuring of its office functions and staffing, the result of which was the rationalization plan for the new organizational structure. At present, the department operates with 4 undersecretaries in the following areas: curriculum and instruction, finance and administration, governance and operations, legal and legislative affairs. 4 assistant secretaries are assigned in the following areas: curriculum and instruction, finance and administration, governance and operations, legal and legislative affairs. Supporting the office of the secretary at the central office are different strands, services, bureaus, and divisions. Curriculum and instruction, finance and administration, governance and operations, legal and legislative affairs, strategic management. The 5 attached agencies: Early Childhood Care and Development Council, National Book Development Board, National Council for Children's Television, National Museum, Philippine High School for the Arts. The 3 coordinating councils: Adapt a School Program Coordinating Council, Literacy Coordinating Council, Teacher Education Council. At the sub-national level, the field offices consist of the following: 17 regional offices and the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or ARMM, each headed by a regional director, a regional secretary in the case of ARMM. 221 provincial and city schools division, each headed by a schools division superintendent. Assisting the schools division offices are 2,602 school districts, each headed by a district supervisor. Under the supervision of the schools division, offices are 62,605 schools, broken down as follows: 49,209 elementary schools, 38,648 public, and 10,561 private. 13,396 secondary schools, 7,976 public, and 5,420 private. The mission and vision and mandate of the Commission of Higher Education. The Commission on Higher Education catalyzes a Philippine higher education system that is locally responsive and globally competitive and serves as a force for lifelong learning, innovation, and social and cultural transformation. Given the national government's commitment to transformational leadership that puts education as the central strategy for investing in the Filipino people, reducing poverty, and building national competitiveness, and pursuant to Republic Act 7722 or the Higher Education Act of 1994, CHED shall promote relevant and quality higher education. Higher education institutions and programs are at par with international standards, and graduates and professionals are highly competent and recognized in the international arena. Ensure that quality higher education is accessible to all who seek it, particularly those who may not be able to afford it. Guarantee and protect academic freedom for continuing intellectual growth, advancement of learning, and research development of responsible and effective leadership, education of high-level professionals, and enrichment of historical and cultural heritages, and commit to moral ascendancy that eradicates corrupt practices, institutionalizes transparency and accountability, and encourages participatory governments in the Commission and the sub-sector. To sum it up, my topic, I have here a table in the Japanese era, Spanish era, American colonization and the Commonwealth, the Japanese era, the Third Republic, and the New Society. Under the Spanish era, primary schools, colleges, and universities were established in our country by the missionaries. Education was religion-centered. in the American colonization and the Commonwealth, to educate and to train in the science of self-government. In the Japanese era, Nippongo, the Japanese language, was made a compulsory subject in all schools. In the Third Republic and the New Society, initiated a 6-year experiment with vernacular instruction that became controversial. In the Spanish era, education for the elite only, Spanish is compulsory, boys and girls are separated. American colonization and the Commonwealth, free primary education was provided and the school for Filipino teachers was established. Under the Japanese era, Japanese Catholic priests were sent to the Philippines to help promote the idea that Japan, being an Asian country, was a friend to all Asian peoples, including the Filipinos. Under the Third Republic and the New Society, Republic Act 7722 or the Higher Education Act of 1994, the CHED catalyzes a Philippine higher education system that is locally responsive and globally competitive and serve as a force of lifelong learning. In the Spanish era, religion was a compulsory subject at all levels from the primary schools to the universities to make the Filipinos obedient and God-fearing Christians. American colonization and the Commonwealth, President Quezon created the National Council of Education in 1936 as an advisory body on educational matters. Japanese era, it promote the promotion of vocational education and to inspire people with the spirit to love neighbor. And the Third Republic and the New Society, the value and work-oriented curricula were encouraged. Thank you for listening and have a good day.